All right. Thank you very much. So, we having fun yet? Happy? Are we happy? Okay, good. I am going to check in with you throughout the day, okay? And if you're not, everybody is here to make sure that you are. So, speaking of that, we want to make sure this is a special conference. This is not like another conference that you've been to or have gone to whatever before. We want to make sure that whatever reason you came for today, whether it was to see the speakers, see the products, see the technology, this is for you. So relax. Maybe you just came to see Weezer tonight. Anybody? Yeah, all right, okay, cool. All right, we'll announce that later. So up next is our fireside chat between our CEO, Eric Yuan, and Sir Michael Moritz, a partner at the most successful venture capital firm in the world. Sir Michael Moritz joined Sequoia Capital in 1986 and has since helped Sequoia adjust to the profound changes in global technology. He has represented Sequoia on the boards of companies including Flextronics, Google, Kayak, LinkedIn, PayPal, and Yahoo, as well as younger businesses such as Instacart, Klarna, and Stripe. He is a best-selling author, most recently having written Leading, which he wrote with his longtime manager of Manchester United, Sir Alex Ferguson. And we have royalty in the house. This is so cool. In 2013, he was knighted by the Queen of England. So, please give a warm welcome to Sir Michael Moritz and Eric Yuan.
Thank you, Michael. I'm very, very excited to have Michael Moritz here. And one of the key reasons I want to share with you also my personal story. I came to Valley in 1997. And in 1998, there's so many great companies. One day I told myself, someday I will start my own company. But I have three things I really wanted to do when I start a company. One is, we're going to have a billboard. We do, right? We have many billboards now. Two, I'm going to meet with Jerry Young. Three, I'm going to meet with Michael Moritz. Not only did I meet all those two, both Michael and Sequoia and Jerry, they are our investors. So that's why I'm so excited that the dream came true. So I think all of you, Michael and Sequoia, quite well known. And I don't want to, introduce Michael and Sequoia anymore. Frank already did that. But however, so Michael, if you do not mind, would you please share with us your word about Sequoia history, and also share with us a little bit more why those people who work together with you and Sequoia really like being in business with you?
That's a very good question, Eric. First of all, thank you for having me here. Probably and I've been doing what I do for well over 30 years, all at Sequoia. And many of the people who work at Sequoia have been with us for many years as well and find great satisfaction in what they do. I think part of it's the thrill of the chase, particularly when we find a small company or an individual, someone like you, Eric, who is on a mission to do something extremely special. And usually we meet those people very early on when most of the rest of the world is quite satisfied or in a state of dissatisfaction with whatever it is, whatever service they're using from other established, very large companies, and nobody expects this founder or pair of founders, Jerry and David, back at the beginning of Yahoo in 1995, set up in a small little trailer on the Stanford campus, or you when you, you and your co-founders when you started Webex or when you started Zoom. Nobody expects you to succeed. And so it becomes a test of will to see whether or not we can conquer the general perception. And every time we find somebody like you or others where we feel they're on a mission, it becomes a personal quest to do absolutely everything that we can to help them succeed, to help the company succeed, to help our investment flourish. And if we succeed, and we the company gradually takes over a marketplace, begins to have a profound impact on lots and lots of people, and is a great place for people to work, has very satisfied customers, and then as a result of all that becomes a financial triumph as well, there's nothing more thrilling because we've defied the odds. And that's why I, at least, love being involved and love continuing to be involved in the formative years of young companies.
Awesome. Thank you. I think
particularly when the founder has learned how to deposit a check.
we do have a bank account also. And I think those investments you made, like Google or Yahoo, I think have benefited all of us, have truly made the world a better place. So among those companies, which companies you think have brought the most happiness to the world?
Different companies in different ways have, and I think happiness is very much a personal quest. Each of us in their own ways during our journeys in life finds their happiness. They find their happiness in the workplace, with relationships, with friendships that you develop as the years go by. But the best companies are the ones that become verbs and that people can't imagine living without. And it has changed the way they live, changed the way they work, helped them do something far more easily that they couldn't have imagined previously, and made their life more satisfying and effective. And I think that's the hallmark of some of the companies that you mentioned. Whether obviously we all benefit today from Google. A couple of decades ago, everybody for the first time was able to explore in an organized fashion as you did the World Wide Web with Yahoo. It opened everybody's eyes. People have been able to move money around the world, thanks to services like PayPal and these days Stripe. If you live in the Bay Area today, to have a contemporary example, my goodness, you don't have to go to grocery stores anymore because Instacart will do something for you that you didn't like doing, and it's made a part of your life better. And as I said, I think the best companies over time become verbs, to Yahoo, to Google, to PayPal, and to Zoom.
Thank you. Thank you. We were fortunate to have names can be a verb. So, and I think every year Sequoia and you and other Sequoia partners, they look at so many companies and entrepreneurs. What are the most important things you are looking for before you and Sequoia decide to invest?
It's the question we always ask ourselves. I very simple-mindedly have just one question I ask, which is, one question in particular and then a follow-up question. The one question is whether I think we could be business partners, investors, shareholders in this company 10 or 15 years from now. Because that means the company is pursuing a large market, and the founder or founders has got a big dream and a fairly clear picture about how to change the world. And I'll give you a couple of examples. You mentioned, and I know the Webex and Cisco relationship, but we invested in Webex, and I remember this actually pretty well at the beginning in Cisco at the beginning of 1987, when it was 8 or 10 people, and one of the founders, Sandy Lerner, was explaining the company, and it sounded glib and it sounded simple, but she said, our business is to network networks. And that was in 1987. 15 years later, 20 years later, that was still Cisco's business. Larry Page had a similar sort of saying. So when we can find that, we listen very acutely. The other thing that is very difficult to do if you're an investor, predisposed to thinking about, worrying about the things that can go wrong, is to imagine what if everything goes right. And that's a big leap to make, but it allows you to think about the possibilities. Sequoia was fortunate enough to be the first investor of any significance in Airbnb. And this was probably, I think now 9 years ago. The company's still obviously a private company. But if you had said to us then that Airbnb would become a verb and allow people to travel differently, you know, nobody would have believed you. And to be frank, we didn't anticipate the success that the company has had, but we back then. But we sort of quickly adapted ourselves to it. And similarly, just one other example, Eric, YouTube.
Yep.
YouTube was composed of about 6 people at the beginning when we invested in the company. And for the first 8 months of the company, the entire YouTube team worked out of the Sequoia office a few miles from here. And very quickly, we began to understand the potential reach of the YouTube service, and felt at that point, and you know, please don't take this as boasting. I don't mean, I think, because I think anybody who with you know, the intelligence of a 12-year-old, given the information that we saw being at close proximity to YouTube, would have reached the same conclusion, that this would have a profound influence as the years went by. And that's exactly, I think, how it's panned out.
It's great. I did not realize YouTube in early stage, they worked in your office. If you know that, we should do the same thing as well. But anyway, I think 6 years ago, you know, when I started Zoom, I talked with quite a few of my angel investors. You know, one of the angel investors is a very close friend of mine, you know, Praful Shah. And he's at Rin Central now. He's an executive over there. And I remember he cited to me, Praful, I think Praful is here somewhere today. He cited to me, Eric, when you further grow your business, you might need to talk with some institutional VCs. And if someday Sequoia can invest in you, you might be onto something big. I think looking back, I think Praful is right on. I think you and Sir Alex Ferguson wrote a book, you know, last year. It's a wonderful book. It is great. If you did not get a chance to read it yet, please, leading. I think, you know, the Manchester United is a top soccer club in the UK for many, many years. You know, Alex Ferguson is a wonderful leader. I'm a huge fan of that club, and also the Sir Alex Ferguson. So, Michael, I want to understand, you know, from your perspective, what was the leadership qualities you admire most in Sir Alex Ferguson?
So I'll give you some background because I don't know in Britain and in Europe and elsewhere where soccer is a much bigger sport than it is in America, people immediately understand the context of Manchester United and Sir Alex Ferguson. But he is, irrespective of country, the most successful coach in the history of professional sports. That includes baseball, basketball, NFL, football. So Alex is the most successful coach of both modern and old eras. He coached this team, Manchester United, for 1986 until a handful of years ago, during which it triumphed. And the reason I got interested in writing the book was I thought it was a way of writing about Sequoia, what we tried to stand for, and what the companies, the very best companies that we invested, tried to stand for, which was success, not just for a short period of time, but for an extended period of time. Not just for one decade, but for multiple decades. Not just for one market cycle, but for multiple market cycles. And to be able to operate at that sort of level of consistency for many years while you were buffeted by changes all around you. And that was and if you look around Silicon Valley in the technology industry, there are not that many examples of companies who've been able to do that. Sequoia started in 1974, and we've been able, for a whole bunch of reasons, to stay in business while lots of others of our competitors have fallen by the wayside over time. And the same goes for companies in which we invest. A special few, flourish for a very long time. We've mentioned some of the names already, but many others fall by the wayside. So for me, it was a voyage of discovery in a series of personal conversations with Sir Alex about how he was able to do at Manchester United what we sought to do at Sequoia Capital, and what we would like companies in which we have sizable shareholdings to also do for themselves. And if you do read or glance at the book, you will find that a lot of what is said there and what Sir Alex and I talked about seems like robust common sense. Mm-hmm. And the very difficult thing to do, which is, it sounds so simple, so bland, so trite, is to do it every day. Mm. And I think that's the difference between the most successful companies, and the ones that fall by the wayside. Obviously, if you're in a company, you need a big market and all the rest of the sorts of things. But most people cannot fail to be consistent over a long period of time. They work very hard for the first year of the company, and then they take their foot off the gas. They experience some success, and they become complacent. They don't have the hunger to think of, in Sir Alex's parlance, next season and starting all over, no matter how many trophies or in our, or how many successful companies we've backed. Every time they start, the whistle blew and they began a new game at Manchester United, it was a brand new encounter and a brand new challenge. Every time we make our first investment in a company, none of the past successes matter. It's a whole new challenge all over again. That's the way he looked at the world. That's the way that I've always looked at the world.
That's awesome. So if you did not get a chance to read this book, I highly recommend that. It's a wonderful book. By the way, this book is very, very powerful. Just to be careful after you finish reading this book. If you are not ready, please do not play soccer. And I give you my personal, this is something real. And that's November, and I got this book. And I really like reading book. I think probably within a week, I finished reading this book. I'm so excited. Happened to be one of my friend, he traveled here, and he invited me to play soccer on Saturday. I did not play soccer for a long, long time. Because of this book, I feel like, wow, I got to have a try, you know. I went into the soccer field on Saturday morning. I was a little bit late. And 5 minutes before the game was over, you know, my Achilles tendon was completely ruptured. This is a very powerful book, and always remember that.
Now that's not a guaranteed experience for everyone who reads the book.
Thank you. So, among those entrepreneurs you mentioned, you know, the Manchester United, and they are in top performer many, many years, very consistent experience. But you look at all those entrepreneurs you and Sequoia invested, how do you motivate them or maybe deliver happiness to those entrepreneurs as well? Any tips, you know, share with us?
As I said earlier, I think it's a personal quest. The pursuit of happiness, and obviously the pursuit of happiness, there are many books that have been written about it. People far smarter than me have opined on it. The best entrepreneurs are self-motivating. They have inner drive. Think of Bill Gates or Steve Jobs or Larry Ellison, you just mentioned, or Jack Ma and Pony Ma and Richard Liu. In China, Richard Liu is a gentleman who started a company, a very successful retailer, the Amazon of China, called JD.com. It's inner drive. They have, each of these people has all the material needs they have. They have notoriety, they have fame, they have all of those sorts of things. But it's this drive they possess, it's curiosity, it's ambition, it's a perpetual state of dissatisfaction with their achievements and accomplishments to date. It's the ability to always be able to imagine something better that they can work towards that lies out in the future. That's how those sorts of people are motivated, I think.
I see. So you joined Sequoia in 1986, you know, a legendary investor. You are chairman now. But how to, you know, keep yourself happy? How do you self-motivate yourself?
Well, and I'm not chairman. I'm a partner. I'm very active. I don't run the business anymore. I'm very actively engaged in some of these young companies, and that's the part of the business I like the most. It's great. You're working with, I'm an old fuddy-duddy these days, but the companies where I represent Sequoia's interests, these are companies these are companies started by very young people who see the world very differently, where one's personal curiosity is satisfied, and where you can learn a lot. And somebody once asked me, you know, what we look for in people when we invest in them. One of the things that I always look for is someone who can teach me a lot about something that I really just don't know very much about. And frequently, young people are the best teachers, even though that flies in the face of conventional wisdom, where everybody says you've got to be old to be a teacher, etc. But in our world, young people working on something brand new will know a lot more about that than people 10, 20, 30 years their senior. And I mentioned earlier a payments company, a B2B payments company. I suspect some of your companies may use the service, called Stripe. Why, we first encountered the two founders of this company, who happened to be brothers, when they were 21 years old and 19 years old, and that is when we invested. That's 8 years ago. And they were just very remarkable people who knew a tremendous amount about the issues and problems with moving money around on the internet that I, for one, certainly didn't know anything. So I've learned a lot through that, and I hope And I suspect that they would tell you that Sequoia, the greater Sequoia, has also helped them as they've developed their company over the last 7 or 8 years.
Yeah, I met both of them. They're awesome. It's very young age.
And they're about to become a Zoom customer as well.
Yeah, very motivated as this great company Stripe. So great to know. Sequoia also invested. So, we talk about, this afternoon we are going to demonstrate our integration with AR, AI, all those technologies. So, what kinds of technology change you think will change what we work the most down the road?
Well, people look, I'm a history major, and before I worked at Sequoia, I was a journalist, so I don't pretend to be a technologist. If I know anything, it's to have some sort of, it's knowing what I really don't know very much about and being able to find people who know a lot about it. So I don't have a profound sense of things that you will hear from me that's any different from you hear or you read about if you read The Economist or Business Week or some of the tech blogs. Everybody says the same thing. They have all the buzzwords: artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data analysis, VR, AI, autonomous vehicles, all of those sorts of things. They're all going to happen. And I think about it in a much more simple-minded fashion, which is Sequoia's business ever since 1974 has only been one thing, which is following the declining cost of computation. And as the price of computing has come down, and technology has sort of infused itself deep in not just the American economy, but the global economy, we've just followed all these different avenues. So when I joined Sequoia, we invested in just really basically two things, which were semiconductor companies and systems companies, mainly computer systems companies. We didn't for a moment ever dream that we would invest in entertainment companies like, say, Electronic Arts, the gaming companies, or more recently, a company like YouTube, or financial services companies, or healthcare services companies, or media companies, or advertising companies. We stayed away from the video conferencing business because we thought the solutions were not very good at all and didn't really do anything. So we're happy now, maybe 30 years after we first looked at a video conferencing company, really to make our first investment in video conferencing with Zoom. So, and why? Because of the price of computing coming down. It's like Dave was mentioning in his remarks earlier. So that's what we're doing. And as more and more things get connected to the internet in more and more places around the world, that just expands the menu of opportunity for us. And what we at Sequoia have got to be on our guard against is thinking backwards and not forwards. I know that doesn't really answer your question, and you're looking for this morsel of wisdom, which you won't get from me, about what technology is going to do differently in the future and where we're going to invest and what the next big thing is. But the world never ever looks like that. If we knew what the next big thing is, would be right there. At the beginning of all of the companies that we've mentioned, we weren't thinking about the next big thing, even though we had big ambitions for them. We were just hoping to survive the first year.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yes, thank you. So, Michael, you also spend a lot of time on philanthropy, and why do you think the philanthropy work can deliver the happiness to the world? I know you spend a lot of time, a lot of resource, donate a lot of money to many, organizations and universities. Can you please share with us a little bit more about what you did?
Well, it's nice of you to ask about it. My wife and I do this sort of quietly, just in things that we happen to believe in. There are all sorts of philanthropists around, and you know, when you contributing to all sorts of causes, some of which strike a chord with me, others don't. And then when you look at the activity and work of Bill and Melinda Gates on the one hand, or Michael Bloomberg on another, it seems like whatever one does on a individual basis seems very, very small by comparison, but which it is. But we've just tried. We just happen to believe in a few things. That we've been extremely lucky. Many people around the world work much harder than I've ever had to work, and for some reason, I just happened to be lucky enough to come and live in Silicon Valley at the beginning of the 1980s, and one thing has gradually led, this whole string of good fortune and good luck. And there are millions of people around the world who didn't have the same opportunity that I did. They didn't get a good education, they didn't have the lucky breaks and all the rest of it. And so what we've tried to do is to find areas that we happen to believe in, primarily around education, and trying to help people who are deprived of the opportunity to have great educations because they come from low-income homes and the scholarships that they can get at good universities won't cover their tuition. People who've been incarcerated and are trying to get back on the right track and come out of jail trying to get credentials so that they can get into the workplace. People of color who are excluded. So we've been giving to those sorts of things. So that's one area. Another area that means a lot for us, and I'm sure means a lot for you, is immigration. Yeah. So particularly in the last 18 months or so, we've really tried to emphasize that, and also civil rights and freedom of speech in America. And also an increasing amount for this incredibly difficult taxing issue that we all see living in the Bay Area, which is homelessness. So we feel an obligation to give back largely on a personal basis. I know that I've been the beneficiary of years and years ago the gifts of many other people. So that's what we're up to. But you know, again, I don't talk about it very much. We try to do it quietly and hope that this helps people change the trajectory of their lives.
Thank you, Michael. So, you know, Sequoia, very successful, one of the best VCs. I think we all know that. So, by the way, you know, Sequoia, China also very, very successful, many years in China as well. You know, Michael not only very well respected here in the United States, but also very, very respected in China as well. Can you share with us, you know, how you look at what's going on in the world? You know, why is that? You know, both Sequoia here is successful, and also Sequoia, China also very successful. It's very unusual.
Well, as I said a little earlier regarding investments, it's very important for us never to be a prisoner of our heritage and to assume what's worked in the past works in the future. So we began to understand, and you know, Sequoia's history has been many of the companies, the vast majority of the companies that we've invested in have been started by immigrants, or there was an immigrant on the founding team and they came from India and they came from China and Korea and Russia and the Ukraine and wherever. But like everybody else, we began to notice maybe 20 years or so ago, the world was starting to change, and all of us, and in fact, the majority of people that at Sequoia anyway, they come from different countries. You know, they come from Italy, from China, from South Africa, from France, from the Middle East, from Pakistan. So we have probably a bit more of a worldly view than a lot of others, and understood that America's grip, Silicon Valley's grip and market share in the formation, in the number of young companies that got started globally was beginning to shrink. And Silicon Valley was and is still a great place to make investments. It's obviously the best place in the United States and the Western world for these sorts of investments. But the market share of tomorrow's market cap we're thinking in the next 10, 20 years, that gets started in Silicon Valley, the Silicon Valley share is going to be, has already begun to slide. Our business is being an early investor in the best technology companies of tomorrow. We used to be able to do it in Silicon Valley in the 70s and 80s, 90s. You can't do it anymore today because of what's happened, especially in China, to a lesser extent in India, and to a far smaller extent in Europe. So we decided we could have a wonderful business here in the United States, but we're pretty restless, we're pretty curious, we're ambitious in our own way. We decided, even though we knew many of the risks associated with it, because we'd only ever had one office, which was in Menlo Park, we'd open up in China. And so we did that about 15 years ago, and started with 2 people and built the business organically. And as you said, thanks to the work of everybody who is with Sequoia in China, thanks to lots of collaboration and cooperation from people in America, we have developed an extraordinary business in China, which has the same, it invests in the same themes that we invest in the United States. Obviously, it's different. The environment, as you know far better than I, is much more different in China. But I think it's obviously, from my point of view, one of the very best decisions, even though, you know, it hasn't been a cakewalk. Like everything else, like the pursuit of growing a young company, they're full of challenges, but I'm ecstatic about our presence in the market, and more particularly the sorts of businesses and investments that we've been able to make along the way in China. And you know, the spirit and the drive and the work ethic and the ambition of the companies in China is unparalleled. Again, you know that much better than I.
Thank you, Michael. I think, you know, when we build a company, quite often employees ask about, you know, how to balance work and life, and also you all, you know, sacrifice your personal life today. Actually come to here, and some even traveled from outside of the country, from other countries. I really appreciate for that. So, Michael, can you share with us how to balance the work and life, how to keep your family very happy? Any tips to share with us?
I'm probably the worst person to ask about that, or one of the worst people. And I'll say, you know, it's politically incorrect, I understand, to say this. But I actually think that most people who achieve extraordinary things, and I'm not recommending it, I'm not saying it's necessarily a good thing to do or the way that people should live their lives, but they don't have a balanced life. They're obsessed with the pursuit that is at the center of their interest, and everything else is peripheral. I remember I've listened to Bill Gates talk about this on any number of occasions, and Bill, I think, is or is approaching the age of 60, or maybe is a bit older than 60, but he shakes his head in bemusement, thinking about the man he was when he was in his teens and his 20s and his 30s, and about the insane length he went to as he was focusing all of his efforts on developing Microsoft. There was nothing beyond Microsoft in his life. And that, I think, is true of lots of other special founders that I've known. And then as the decades go by, as the companies grow, and you have a different perspective on life when you're 50 than you do when you're 20 or 30. World changes, circumstances change, people tend to broaden out, but I think there's a time of life for all of this. And people who want a comfortable style of life and be able to take off lots of time, have lots of other interests outside of their work life, I don't think, and again, it's not a criticism, that's a perfectly fine way of choosing how to live, but they're probably not going to do something out of the ordinary. And so, again, I'm not recommending it for everybody. I'll put the little disclaimer there, but I think for the obsessives, a balanced life isn't possible.
Thank you. That's a great advice. I will repeat what you said to my wife today. Thank you all. Let's give Michael Moritz a big round of applause. Thank you.